right, well, as fate would have it, I'm on a bus here coming back from Corinth, and I'm sitting with this beautiful girl. Her name is Esther.
Hi.
And I found out some very interesting things because I was doing some research. One of my research projects was on sexuality in antiquity, because I found out that some of the things I'm hearing in recent American culture doesn't match what I learned as a Greek. And I'm sitting next to a young lady who took history at what university?
Florida State University. It's a public university.
Okay, so a secular university. And you were a history major?
Yes.
Okay. And now she was telling me some stuff that she learned about Roman history.
Just Roman history.
So tell me about like the years and what they did. You know, when was it?
Well, during the height of the Roman Empire, the men, they all served in the war usually, the army, excuse me, in the armed forces, a lot of Sparta. But the men, they would go off to war until they were about 30, 35 sometimes, and then they would come back and get married. And so until 30 or 35, these men had younger men in the war, 15, 14-year-old boys who carried their helmets, their swords, you know, were their cupbearers, different things like that. But these boys also served as homosexual partners for the men. And it was widely accepted in the culture for the men to sleep with these boys until the boys got older and they became men and they had their own young boys. And because only men, as you know, were allowed in the army, in the battlefield, so women were not allowed to come and be with the men. And so the men would go back and they would marry women who were about 16 when the men themselves were 30. And it was a big psychological shift for the men because they have been mostly homosexual their entire lives up until 30 years old, so you can imagine. And what they did was they would shave off the women's head, their head of hair, shave off their head of hair, and the men would have their wedding night in a dark room, usually not lit at all, to help them transition from sleeping with a boy to sleeping with a young female girl. And in the studies that we did, it was always about, oh, this was so hard for men and it was very scary for them. And as you know, at this time, women were a second-class citizen and they were not even considered. But beyond that, it was just the general acceptance of the homosexual acts in the culture that didn't make the men homosexuals themselves. They were still, you know,
Were all the men doing this, or just a few that were so-called gay?
No, it was actually widely done. It was most of the men did this because the women who were getting married, they had to be pure, they had to be chaste, and so it was a kind of perversion in a way for the men to be able to have sex while they were abroad in other countries for years at a time. So they would take little boys, and because it had been done to them, they did it again, and it just spread generations and generations of homosexual acts. But they weren't called gay because they eventually got married. And I mean, it was very common also in the bathhouses. There were many perversions of the Roman culture that went on during the Roman Empire, where men slept with men and different things like that, but they never considered themselves homosexual.
And I knew that to be true in the Greek culture, but you're saying this was Roman culture. And what kind of history class was this that you learned at?
This was like a Mediterranean and European history, site in history major in Florida State University.
Okay, well that's very interesting. And you've had some friends that were abused, that you said that were crying in your arms. Tell me about your friends that were caught up maybe in the homosexual lifestyle, but it was because, I don't know, you were just telling me some stuff that was like, you know, radical about how they were hurt, thought they had to be hurt?
I think that my generation, 20s, you know, young 20s, we have this political correctness that's floating around, that we've been taught an agenda, and agendas, especially on university campuses, are very, very liberal, saying that, you know, this is, everybody is right, you know, and being religious is wrong. But the thing about it is, studying God's Word, and when you draw closer to God, it really grieves your spirit. Homosexuality grieves your spirit, and that does not mean that you don't love people who are homosexual, because I love them, and I have many of them in my college classes, but it is not right, and many times you can date their hurt and their pain back, and it's such a lie of the enemy to convince them that this is the way they are, they were born this way, that they'll never be able to change, because that's what the enemy wants to do. He wants to change your identity and tell you who you are, but you already know who you are, because the Bible tells you, Jesus Christ told you who you are in His Word, and it's just a false sense of identity. And these people aren't evil, they're confused, and they're ignorant sometimes of the truth, and being Christians, us being ignorant along with them isn't helping them. Us being light and being the truth in love is helping them.
So what is some of these dilemmas that you said that some people were like crying in your arms and saying that they needed to be hurt because they hurt, or some kind of perverted kind of thinking?
Well, I was kind of pointing out that, you know, the Bible tells us to abstain from sexual immorality and sexual promiscuity, and I think a lot of our culture today, we only approach the topic of homosexuality. We only say, well, homosexuality is wrong. We don't approach people fathering bastard children and having children outside of wedlock. We don't approach sadomasochism. We don't approach all kinds of sexual fetishes that are inappropriate, and they're not pure at all, and they're not what God intended when He made man and woman to procreate in love and in one under God. You know, it's a union, and I think that these people, they suffer from their very dirty and their evil compulsions, and they can't help themselves, these lusts, and they keep going, and it grows and it grows and it eats away at them, and their, you know, sexual addictions. And now we have all kinds of TV shows that shed light on these things, where people, it's not even enjoyable to them anymore. It's an addiction that they can't stop, and they wish to stop, but they can't. And you know, I think that God is teaching us purity and love. I don't know if you can use this.
Why not?
Oh, okay.
And also, the thing is, you were telling me about people that needed healing, and they were so wounded, and they were like crying in your arms or something like that. I want to hear about the people that were crying.
Well, I've had many friends who have experimented in homosexuality. They were raised in the church, but they were raised without a mother or a father figure. Often cases of rape and abuse, molestation. And a good friend of mine, she's a pastor's daughter. She lived for several years dating girls, and she was crying out for love. Her mother died of AIDS. She was born with HIV positive, and she was rejected from man after man because no one wanted to be with her because of her disease. And she turned to women, and she found a place of safety. She found that mothering figure she always wanted, and she's now a proud mother herself, and she's happy. But she tells me all the time, I wanted a mommy that I never had, and I wanted a mother to take me in her arms and tell me that I was worthy and I was loved. And I feel a lot of times in homosexual relationships, it is a perversion of us looking for a parental love, whether it be a mother for a woman or a father for a man. Sometimes it's abuse. We've been abused by the opposite gender, and we desperately seek out love in another another way because we're so hurt we can't accept that the opposite gender. We think we can only trust our same gender. And so I don't think I have the answers to every question, but from my personal experience, I can always see hurt and pain traced out of, you know, homosexuality, and there's a cry for love, and we shouldn't judge. We should absolutely not judge or hate, but we do need to bring the truth with love.
Yeah, and not discount the fact that God heals everything.
Oh, God completely. He radically transforms lives, and if it's happened once, it's happened hundreds of times. I sit in church every Sunday with my friend who lived for almost a decade, where she truly and really believed that she was supposed to be with women, and I can't, you know, explain it. I've never struggled with that myself, but she is so happy, and she is a mommy now, and she has a husband, and she is happy, and she is free, but it is such a trick, and it's more in your mind, you know. It's a very mental attack it's an identity crisis. It's what it is.
Yeah. Okay, well, thank you, Esther from Florida. Where you live?
Fort Lauderdale.
Fort Lauderdale, and you're 22. 22, and you're Esther. Thank you very much. This beautiful woman, you know, can you see me through the camera now? She was sitting next to me on this bus here while I came to her, and actually our first conversation was waiting in line for the bathroom, and she started telling me this stuff, and I'm going, dang, I'm doing a study on this. I need this video. But look at this. We're coming back from Corinth, and people are having fun. Yeah, it's his birthday girl here.
We went to counseling over.
Hi, Phyllis.
Birthday girl.
It's a video.
Yeah, and I don't know, there's some rocket stuff going on here. Now, this is Do you remember what your name is?
Oh yes.
What is your name?
Jesus.
Okay. All right. Well, these are the happy people.
You were limited to.
Okay.
Limited to, and I did some like